If you think your ancestors survived the end of the Ice Age by settling down on flat, cozy riverbanks, you are dead wrong. To early humans, living permanently on low, flat terrain made zero sense. It was a death sentence. Forget the pop culture myths of solitary men building giant wooden arks to float away the apocalypse. That never happened. When the ice sheets shattered, you didn't build a ship, you ran. Days before a deluge struck, your body would feel it first. A deep, sub-audible infrasound vibrating through the soles of your feet as massive ice dams cracked under millions of tons of hydrostatic pressure. Then came the smell. Compressed air pushed miles ahead of the wave, thick with the stench of decaying riverbed silt and rotten eggs. When the water finally broke, it wasn't a pristine wave. It was a chocolate-brown slurry of basalt boulders and uprooted timber, moving at 80 miles an hour, acting like liquid sandpaper against the earth. Survival wasn't about divine intervention. It was about reading the planet's sensory alarms, exploiting rapid micro-elevation mobility, and eventually pioneering radical earthwork engineering to keep the deadly water at bay. Imagine living 14,000 years ago during the Great Meltwater Pulses. Your survival didn't start with a sudden downpour. It started months earlier. You watched the signs. Ants built their nests higher up the hills. Snakes abandoned their burrows. The river turned cloudy, cold, and bitter. Then came the true warning. Days before any water arrived, a sub-audible hum vibrated through the soles of your feet. Infrasound. The low-frequency shudder of massive glacial dams fracturing under millions of tons of hydrostatic pressure. Moments later, the wind shifted. Compressed air rushed miles ahead of the wave, choking your lungs with the stench of rotten eggs, crushed pine, and decaying river silt. When the deluge hit, it wasn't clear water. It was a viscous, chocolate-brown slurry packed with giant basalt boulders and uprooted forests. Moving at high velocity, this liquid sandpaper roared past at over 120 decibels, pulverizing bedrock into fine powder. You didn't build a massive ark. You survived through micro-elevation mobility. You sprinted to high basalt ridges or climbed stilt-borne reed platforms anchored deep into willow roots. This was real, cataclysmic trauma. Its terror was so deeply burned into our ancestors that it gave rise to over 300 global flood myths, from Sumerian tablets to Aboriginal oral histories. Memories of a broken world, echoing down through human history. To understand how these megafloods happened, you have to look inside the ice. Deep beneath colossal glacial sheets, meltwater slowly accumulates under immense pressure. But ice floats. The moment water depth reaches 90% of the ice's density, the unthinkable occurs. A multi-gigaton ice dam lifts clean off its bedrock anchor. As the first trickle escapes, frictional heat takes over. Runaway thermal erosion melts the frozen walls exponentially. Within hours, a minor leak transforms into a catastrophic wall of water. Faced with this liquid fury, your ancestors stopped merely running. They began to engineer. 5,000 years ago in China's Yangtze Delta, ancient builders constructed the Liangzhu system, a massive 11-dam network. To absorb the hydrological impact, they wrapped raw silt inside woven reed bales, combining high dams and spillways to divert millions of tons of raging water away from their land. Along the stormy North Sea, coastal settlers engineered artificial hills known as turpin. By packing clay, sod, and livestock manure together, they built elevated platforms up to 26 feet high. Entire villages stood secure, watching violent storm surges roll harmlessly beneath their feet. Humanity was no longer just fleeing the tide. We were reshaping the earth to survive it. For thousands of years, these survival memories weren't just folklore, they were hyper-accurate science. On the coast of Australia, First Nations oral traditions passed down descriptions of 21 distinct ocean drowning events from 13,000 years ago. When modern geologists mapped those exact seafloor contours with advanced bathymetric sonar, the ancient stories matched the depth charts perfectly. Yet despite knowing the water's terrible power, your ancestors couldn't stay away. Driven by a deep evolutionary trade-off, early farmers poured into the fertile alluvial plains of Mesopotamia and the Nile Delta. They gambled their lives on rich, silt-heavy soil, trading the constant risk of catastrophic drowning for the promise of abundant crops. That same ancient instinct rules your world today. It's called cognitive normalcy bias, the dangerous psychological blind spot that convinces you a rare disaster won't happen just because it hasn't happened recently. We continue to erect sprawling megacities directly inside low-lying floodplains, trusting modern concrete levees to hold back the tide. We inherited our ancestors' irresistible pull toward the river's edge. But in our modern hubris, we've forgotten the sensory warnings that saved their lives. Look beneath the waves of the North Sea, and you'll find Doggerland, a drowned prehistoric heartland where fishermen still haul up ancient harpoons, flint tools, and Neanderthal bones from the seabed. The sheer scale of these ancient cataclysms defies comprehension. The Missoula megaflood unleashed 10 million cubic meters of water per second, 10 times the combined discharge of every river on Earth, tearing across the land at 80 miles an hour. When the Storiga submarine landslide triggered, it hurled an 8-story wall of ocean 50 miles inland at jet speed. To survive, early humans performed impossible feats. At Liangju, 10,000 laborers worked continuously for a decade to move 10 million cubic meters of earth, while early Mesopotamians sealed their embankments with natural bitumen asphalt. When engineering failed, raw panic took hold. Off the coast of Wales, low tides still expose fossilized footprints of entire families sprinting inland from drowned forests. And deep in isolated European caves, bones scraped with cut marks tell an even darker story. Stranded on shrinking islands, desperate survivors turned to cannibalism as the endless water closed in. Look around at our modern world. We erect billion-dollar concrete seawalls, automated storm surge barriers, and vast networks of levees to protect our sprawling cities. We like to think our high-tech infrastructure makes us masters of the natural world, but strip away the steel, asphalt, and computer models, and you realize something startling. We are still using the exact same playbook written 5,000 years ago. Every megaproject built today rests on 3 core Neolithic principles: divert, store, and elevate. When Dutch engineers drain massive coastal polders, they are simply scaling up the ancient clay mounds built by North Sea tribes. When massive dams channel river surges into retention reservoirs, they are using the exact hydrological logic pioneered by the builders of Liangju. We haven't conquered the water. We've simply traded woven grass bales for reinforced concrete and reed stilts for steel pillars. Your ancestors knew a truth that modern civilization constantly tries to ignore: you cannot stop the deluge. You can only outsmart it, adapt to it, or make sure you're standing on high ground when it comes. Today, we build our cities on a dangerous illusion, trusting rigid concrete walls to shield us forever. But your ancestors ran a far more resilient survival code. Where we rely on static engineering, they survived through dynamic adaptation, hyper-acute sensory awareness, and oral traditions that preserved life-saving warnings across millennia. When the post-glacial oceans swallowed entire continents, they didn't survive on mythical wooden arks. They survived because they felt the earth vibrating beneath their feet. They read the land, engineered the mud, and burned the memory of catastrophic floods into the collective mind of their descendants for 10,000 years. The megafloods of the past were real, brutal, and relentless. Yet human adaptability proved stronger than the tide. As our planet enters a new era of shifting climates and rising seas, the ancient threat remains unchanged. The question isn't whether the water will return, it's whether we still have the wisdom to listen.